Historia Canadiana is recorded on the unceded lands of the Kanien'kehá:ka First Nation.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of A Cultural History of Canada. My name is Patrick, and with me, as always, Mr. Cooper. None other. The magical Mr.
None
Cooper.
other but the one, the man, the something something and the something, Mr. Aura.
Yay! Ba-ba-da-ba.
Ba-ba-da-ba, ba-ba-da-ba.
So, yeah,
We
again,
can use AI on our Google Docs.
can we? Why are we doing?
Try Gemini.
No, no.
But we can get Gemini to write episodes of A Cultural History of Canada.
I
I say we feed Gemini every episode we've done, including all the Pop Canada episodes,
Okay.
and we see what it spits out.
Okay, yeah, next episode is just going to be like the weird AI generated episode.
That's right. It's
So,
gonna
wait.
be the most commie red, like holy shit.
So wait, I could even make that better. So you know how Notebook LM has like
Mhm.
an option to record an AI generated podcast?
Okay.
Okay,
I
so
didn't, but pop off.
so basically what you can do, you could give it documents and it'll give you like an AI generated conversation between, I guess, the same computer, but it sounds like two people having a conversation about the document that you just uploaded, right?
Hmm.
So if you set in a book, it'll give you like a 15-minute conversation on that book, right? Um, and so what you could do, you can make it like double AI. You ask Gemini to to write up notes for our episode, and then you feed those notes into Notebook LM and just ask it to produce an episode on that. It's
Nice.
just like we're getting into like the ultimate simulation. In this case, this is fourth degree simulation right there. Let's go.
For the simulacra.
Yep, there's
Actually,
no bearing on reality whatsoever.
I run a little like lit club for my students here, and this has some bearing on our episode today.
Great.
And we've been doing films this term. And so, to keep it interesting for them, every week we've been doing one film by the great Steven Spielberg.
Oh, nice. Hmm.
And this week was Schindler's List.
A movie that I've never felt like rewatching. Not because it's
That's what I
bad.
sort of told him. Yeah, that's what I told him. Like, this movie is great.
Yeah.
Do not watch it if you're in a bad mood.
Right. And once you've seen it, you're like, cool. I don't see myself ever popping this in again just because.
No. It's still like, it was a wonderful film, though. It's beautiful.
Hmm. Yep.
Easily
Anyway.
one of his best works. But yeah,
So you
and it was a really interesting discussion of looking at like the real true story of Oskar Schindler, and then which then became the book Schindler's List. So the simulation,
Yeah.
which then became Schindler's List.
The
film.
simulacra. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome, actually. That's a really good point. I've never actually looked into the differences between the real life,
Neither have
the
I.
movie, and
I
the
just thought it was a good connection to today's
Yeah.
episode theme. What is the theme of today's episode, Patrick?
anti-Semitism.
That's right, folks. You heard it here first. Patrick is an anti-Semite.
Please don't say that. No.
I'm kidding. We all know he's not.
I still never managed to get our episode on fascism back up on YouTube because we quoted from, or we read from pieces of fascist literature, and the YouTube algorithm just does not recognize us quoting rather than us saying those things. And it's awful.
That's so fun. You gotta wonder what we'd have to do. Would we have to put ourselves through like an Alvin and the Chipmunks voice filter?
I don't know. I'm not well versed enough in the YouTube algorithm bullshit to know what we would have to do. It doesn't matter. Like, we don't get that many views on YouTube anyway, but like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, we're not getting any money off of YouTube, that's for sure.
No. So, before we get into that, of course, a big shout out to our Patreon supporters and anyone who sends in comments and listeners. We actually did get a comment that we've gotten before, but we've gotten it again. Someone pointing out that we mispronounced Fraser, the Fraser Valley. So that episode is going to haunt us forever because we talked about the gold rush in British Columbia like 3 years ago at this point.
No,
And someone in the comments was still like, "You keep pronouncing it wrong. I'm sorry. We know."
I'm gonna keep doing it on purpose. How am I
I
supposed
cannot.
to pronounce it?
It's Fraser because there's
Fraser.
yeah. Exactly.
All right, everybody, we're gonna talk about the Fraser Valley today. Sorry, did I say that wrong? The Fraser Valley.
Good. I think that's
I
peak.
love the TV show Frasier.
Yeah, because there's no
So,
I in it, you don't pronounce it Fraser. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
anti-Semitism.
Yeah, anti-Semitic. So I figured this would be it wouldn't be a long episode, but it would be a good complement to the one that we did on fascism not that long ago, um, because it is associated, of course, right?
It's so out of fashion.
It is. um, it is associated, but of course it is rather distinct. And
Well,
fascism is not necessarily anti-Semitic, but the way that
no,
it came
developed.
out in Canada and developed in Canada and in Germany, it
That's
was
just it.
inevitably tied.
Fascism in its root developed from an anti-Semitic point of view, but fascism itself does not necessarily require
Yeah.
anti-Semitism as a point. Because
Actually,
the most important part of fascism is that your chosen nationality, ethnicity, race must be number one. All others are inferior.
yeah. But I mean, even that's again how it developed in Germany. But in
Mm.
Italy, which is the original fascismo, that had
Where the
it was
trains
just
ran on time.
but it was meant to be strong men, right? That root
Mm.
of like strong, powerful men making decisive action through an embracing of violence. That's basically all it was. I mean, all it was. That's awful, and you shouldn't embrace it.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, like they weren't the anti-Semitism part wasn't necessarily prevalent in Italy, as far as I know. I could be wrong, um, but yeah, obviously, it has different flavors. We'll say it that way. It has, there are different flavors of fascism.
Yummy.
Mm.
I love me some fascism bolognese.
Oh, we're gonna get demonetized again because of your jokes.
Anti-Semitic strudel.
Regrettable choice of words brought to you by Mackenzie.
I swear I'm working on it.
Okay.
God, I'm a bad person sometimes.
So, do you remember, like, what do you remember of our episode that we did on fascism? Like, how it developed in Canada and, like, what form it took here, broadly
I
speaking?
remember it was weirdly, didn't it develop it a bit? It developed Ontario, but it
Hmm.
was also it started off in like rural communities, if I remember correctly.
Yep,
It was
absolutely, it
very
did.
much a rural movement.
Hmm. Yep. Very rural, but mostly because it was tied to, like, as you were saying, some kind of sense of national unity,
Yeah.
right?
I
Or
also
a national
remember
sense of unity. Yeah.
while fascism did have a foothold, it never actually grew that large,
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
which you can't say about what we're talking about today.
Exactly. That's a really key distinction to make, and that's not to say that there were not fascist politicians here. There 100% were, right? But
Hmm.
their capacity to mobilize a large number of people, right, in the same way that you saw even in the United States or in Europe, just never quite hit the same.
Well, and I
Um,
think again, it's part of the issue of Canadian identity. You can't
mhm.
promote a fascist identity in Canada because Canada does not have a national identity with which to promote as better than everybody else.
Yeah,
That's the most powerful weapon of multiculturalism.
right. But that's what's kind of interesting is that the people who were closest to fascism here were the ones who wanted to promote some kind of like national unity.
Yeah.
And so you do get hints of it, right? Like, especially during wartime, you do get hints in the rhetoric of people, although they were never explicitly stated to be fascist, right? So again, you get hints, just whispers of it here and there, and less so explicit groups, which were there, just never on the national, like,
Yeah.
parliamentary stage necessarily. Except maybe Mackenzie King here and there. Well, he was a bit too cozy with Hitler sometimes. We'll
Yep.
put it that way. Okay, so when it comes to anti-Semitism, we already mentioned that it's often a branch of fascism, especially Nazism. Um, but of course, it's not tied to it, right? Inevitably, right? Because anti-Semitism has existed, we could say, as long as like Jewish people have existed. I guess you could say it that way.
So it started back with this guy named Ramses, who had an adopted brother by the name of Moses.
A cultural history of Canada brought to you by Egypt.
Brought to you by DreamWorks and the Prince of Egypt.
So, do you want to give us a working definition of just like
anti-Semitism?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So no, it is actually very important, I think, to define the layers of this, because you see a lot of people trying to conflate versions of anti-Semitism as also being anti-Zionist. And while that is also an entirely different kettle of worms that neither me nor you are very much qualified to discuss, and if we try to, my mother will send me long, long messages about, the key thing is, to be anti-Semitic, you are against the Jewish people and culture, which is different from Zionism, which is a term that you hear a lot today, which is more related to the state of Israel itself.
Right. The idea of a homeland. Right.
Yeah. And so to be anti-Semitic means that's how you have, somehow weirdly contradictorily, you have people who are both anti-Semitic but pro-Zionist.
Yes. Right. And then you can get into a whole issue of the term Semite itself doesn't exclusively refer to Jewish people, right? At its core, right?
Yeah.
So you can
we'll
get into a whole discussion, right? You're getting into linguistic pedantry at that point, right? In the modern sense of the term, and as we're going to be using it today, it refers, generally speaking, to
anti-Jewish sentiment.
Exactly. Right.
Anti-Jewish sentiment, very like, and it's not even necessarily religious persecution.
No.
It is persecution of them as a culture and people.
Exactly. Right.
Because that's really, like, yes, Judaism is a religion, huge, like one of the world's largest, but Jewish people have also evolved to a point where they are a culture and a people all on their own.
Yeah.
It's why somebody can be Jewish without practicing Judaism. So, like, Daniel Radcliffe is actually a very famous example of this, where his mother is Jewish. So therefore he is, I think the phrase that he used was ethnically Jewish.
Yes.
But he himself is not practicing Judaism.
Right, exactly. But that's, I think, a really good distinction, because historically a lot of anti-Semitic rhetoric, right, no matter where it happens in the world, does not actually focus on the religious part of it, right? Like, because if you break it down on the religious level, it is shockingly similar to a lot of just Abrahamic religions, right? On its like core principles, for example. Right?
Yes. Well, if you break, let's talk about Yahweh for a second. It's almost like these religions developed off each other.
Right, exactly. Obviously, I'm not saying that they're not different from one another. There are differences in like practices and beliefs and all of that. That's not what I'm saying.
No, it's just when you talk, again, not to come at this from a religious perspective, but I guess more through a theological perspective, it starts to get very complicated when you go that far back, and you start to see like that's a lot of stuff is not what people actually know it to be.
Right. Right.
But that's not the point of our episode. The point of our episode is to talk about anti-Semitism in Canada. So let's break it down, Patrick.
Right. So there has been like a Jewish community, and we actually did a previous episode on early Jewish communities in Canada.
Yep.
Like this would have been like 4 years ago. I don't know at this point. It was
back
a while
when we were
back.
recording regular episodes.
And we should be back to regularly scheduled programming soon once our school schedule manages to be a little bit more better. But anyway, doesn't matter. So we did an episode on it a while back. So there has been consistent Jewish presence in Canada. We'll just say forever at this point, for quite some time. There has been some kind of Jewish presence since the early days of colonial expansion, right?
Yeah.
it starts you when you talking specifically about anti-Semitism, you do see most of its roots emerge explicitly or at least more strongly in the 19th century, as of course the Jewish population also starts to increase, right? Um,
Yep.
that being said, and we cannot stress this enough, the Jewish population in Canada was never that huge, right? Um, and it is notable. There are plenty of Jewish people in Canada today, right? But it was never so big that, as people who are anti Semitic would claim, that it would have been a quote unquote issue, right? But that's not how racism works, right? Yeah, we can pause for a sec.
Sorry. I can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me
Oh, there you
now?
go.
Sorry. So yeah, it wouldn't, like I said, the actual number of Jews, even though there was an anti-Semitic discourse that emerged, especially in the 19th century, it was never actually justified, so to speak.
Yes.
Right? Like in
No,
the sense,
it's
but it's never justified, obviously, but in the sense that there were never actually that many Jewish people. Right?
well, it's also again, it's something that happened because the Jewish people are a culture and group and ethnicity all into themselves,
Hmm.
but they lack a lot of what we would like historic like they're due to history, they are very much a nomadic people.
Hmm.
And so they lack a lot of what we would traditionally consider to be like cultural norms and all these other things, which has made them like they are outcasts by design
Yes.
because they are always the people coming into a country and like living somewhere else, you
Right.
know? You
And
can be Jewish and living in France, but then you might not say you're French or you're from France or whatever.
okay, so that's really interesting. So I don't think, by the way, just to clarify, I don't think you're saying that necessarily negatively, by the way, knowing you
No,
at
no, no,
least.
no.
Like, you're
Like
not
this
saying
is
that in a
literally just
negative
me
sense.
trying to give the context of what this is. Like,
Good. So, why do you think it would be a problem then for 19th century thinkers, quote unquote, right? That what exactly you're talking about, right? Because for us, we don't care. Like we're
no.
relatively woke, progressive people, right? To put it in modern parlance, I don't give a fuck. But for 19th century nationalists and thinkers in Canada and elsewhere, why would
Well, they're
this
never
thing
going
that
to
you're
become
describing?
part of the nationalist sentiment.
Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba.
And there's other, I honestly like thinking about it now. There's so much going on there. So A, they're never going to
Mm-hmm.
be part of the nationalist sentiment. B, due to their nomadic lifestyles, they, well, not nomadic, but like
Yeah, yeah.
they're not non-strictly sedentary lifestyles, especially in the 19th and 20th centuries.
Mm-hmm.
They don't settle down a lot. And
Right.
if you're not settling down, what aren't you doing? You're not working in factories. You're not taking part in the capitalist system. You're not doing this. You're not being part of the industrial complex.
Yeah.
And if you're not being part of the industrial complex in the 19th century, you know what you are? You're a damn dirty commie.
Okay, so so much of what you just
Just
said
like Karl Marx himself.
but so much of what you said is part of the paradox, right? Because that idea, right, of let's pick up on the uh, nomadic element, right, that you're bringing up, right, has biblical origins, right, in
Yeah.
Exodus, for
Yeah.
example. But you'll notice that this perception comes from the fact of anti-Semitism in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of different cultures did not want Jewish peoples in their communities, right? It inevitably forced the Jewish communities to be less sedentary, right? And to kind of move around as a kind of, what's the term I'm looking for? Diaspora, right?
Yes.
And so it's kind of like a vicious circle in that sense. And then it becomes used to justify exactly what you're saying, right? Oh, they don't integrate and they don't stay long and blah, 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 right? Not then ignoring the fact that it's the anti-Semitism in the first place that often caused this.
Yes.
But of course, that's never true, right? Because there's no like, that there are plenty of Jewish communities that settled across the world. And managed to stay and live very productive
Oh, no,
lives.
100%. Like, I'm not, again, the nomadic thing is very much a generalization
Yeah.
and an
No, I'm not saying
old
you're saying that. Like, just though that rhetoric can very easily be disproved.
disproved, twisted. Well, it's the same. It's a lot of like, there are so many instances where they would get blamed not because of any reality, but because
Hmm.
of just misconstruing things. So
Yeah.
take, for example, back in like the medieval leading into the Renaissance era,
Hmm.
where they were seen as like they didn't get the plague and they were performing black magics and blah blah. And it's like, well, no, their culture just had bathing in it.
They had better hygiene.
Like they
Who
had
knew?
better hygiene, therefore the disease did not like. It's very simple stuff.
The black magic of soap.
Well, again, it's also, it's the stereotypes as well,
Uh-huh.
the common held stereotype of Jewish people and money.
Hmm.
They weren't allowed to work any other jobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Therefore, they became moneylenders. That's what was available to them.
Which ties into the other point that you were bringing up of like they can't participate in capitalism, right?
No,
And so for a while that was true on some extent, right? Insofar as they couldn't be the workers behind capitalism, right? And
no.
the ones that did, right, were, you're right, absolutely often communists, right? You see an explicit tying in the early 20th century and late 19th century of Jews and like some kind of left-wing ideas, right? That was one of the basis for that time's anti-Semitism, was like, oh, also anti-communism, right? Because they came in from Eastern Europe and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And it had like that whole connotation to it. But also, ironically and perhaps paradoxically, there was this vehement idea of like, oh, and you still see it today, Jews are the one who control the money, which statistically is not true, right? There are just as many Jewish people that are heads of banks as there are Christians, for example, right? Like it has no actual basis in reality.
No. Again,
Um,
all stereotypes.
yeah, but you were talking about Karl Marx, right? He's one of many people who wrote pamphlets in the
Communism.
19th century called "The Jewish Question," right? Which is
Do
probably
people
like,
still write pamphlets?
but at the time,
No, I mean today though.
yeah, I've seen some.
Okay.
Yeah, nobody reads them as much because blogs and stuff, but yeah,
Yeah.
they're around. Um, but Marx himself wrote a piece called "The Jewish Question," um, which people who haven't read it associate with his anti-Semitism or his perceived anti-Semitism. But what he's doing is using the term Jewish to mean moneylender and capitalist,
Yes.
right? Which is not necessarily to say that it's better because of it. It's still problematic in and of itself as a use of a term, but it does go to show just like what that association was in a lot of people's minds
Yes.
at the time, right? So anyway, back to Canada. Right?
Yeah, that's what anti-Semitism is like. That's just sort of
Yeah.
explaining like how anti-Semitism has continued on these thousands of years.
Yeah. So there was actually in the early 20th century the creation of Jewish communities in Canada because, as we mentioned, it did exist as far as a community, but also anti-Semitism was a thing, right? And
Hmm.
so, as you see in the face of any kind of hardship, people kind of tend to band together. Shocker, right? No matter who you are, you tend to band with who you associate with
Trust.
in some broad form, right? So in 1919, right after World War I, you see the creation of the Canadian Jewish Congress, right? And basically, it was the number one institution in Canada that was trying to combat anti-Semitism, right? And by the 1930s, it was lobbying the Canadian government and Canadian officials, broadly speaking, to admit Jewish refugees, right, that were attempting to escape none other than the Nazis.
Yes.
It might be a little bit disconcerting for people to hear this, but it didn't actually do much, right? Like
Yes.
the Canadian state did not care much, right? Like it accepted that things like the Canadian Jewish Congress existed, but explicitly did not want to bring in more refugees, right? Jewish refugees.
No.
Again, maybe a hint to what we see today with our refugee discourse, right? And how we do accept
It's
some,
not great.
but there's a lot of people who are like, no, that's enough, right? So fantastic stuff. Um, One of the people who actually led the Canadian Jewish Congress, you might know of, his name was Samuel Bronfman. He was a wealthy and rather influential businessman, and he was the founder of Seagram's whiskey, right? So,
Ooh,
very,
fun.
yeah, very well-known person, established in Ontario. But again, very little was actually achieved by the Congress as far as actually helping the Jewish community that was aggressively being genocided overseas. Um, what's really interesting is that part of why this discourse exists in Canada, and why there was such a kind of resistance to bringing in Jewish refugees is kind of what we would call today systemic racism, right? The kind of anti-Jewish sentiment in Canada was just so ingrained, and that's not to forgive it, right? It was just kind of taken for granted by this point, right?
Yeah.
In the same way that, like, again, perhaps in an overused way, but people use the term systemic racism, right? That's what we mean when we talk about that term, right?
Mhm.
It's just things that we just don't even acknowledge anymore because it's just obvious for us that it should be the case, right? It shouldn't be the case, of course, but that's how people's minds work after decades of ideology. So I saw one source claim that we arguably had like the worst track record as far as like actually providing sanctuary for the European Jewry during the Holocaust. So, for comparison's sake, about 5,000 Jews made it to Canada during World War II. And if we want to compare it to Argentina, where they had 22,000, 85,000 were accepted into Great Britain, and about 100,000 in what at the time was known as Palestine, right? So, you know,
Ironic.
yeah, the irony is real on that one. Um, so, yeah, comparatively, we are doing not so great. And
Yes.
obviously, it's easier for Britain to actually accept more because they're closer, but still,
Well, closer, but also fighting their own war.
right? Like, you'd think they would have bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, just as a way of putting it into numbers,
Yeah.
basically, um, this would actually kind of get better. I guess you can put it that way after World War
Mm.
II, right? When the full scope of what was actually going on in Nazi Germany made it to places like Canada and the United States, right? Um, and because we do have to remember, for a lot of people, obviously communication at the time was not that great. And while there were rumors and indications as to what was happening in Nazi Germany, some people just straight up didn't know, right? Or couldn't confirm. And so sometimes it was a little bit sketchy to do that. But yeah, anti-Semitism did recede somewhat post World War II, and with the help of some sympathetic politicians and courts,
Mm.
and successful lobbying and so on, um, we kind of let in Jews with surprising rapidity after World War II. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so after World War II, when the rise of like multicultural Canada, we had Jewish premiers, Jewish chief of justice, governors of the Bank of Canada, ambassadors, university presidents, and so on, right?
Yeah.
And all of these would have been closed to Jews as positions prior, right, in previous generations. And so you do see a notable shift on at least a legal basis for this. Um, yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add here as far as like the historical context is concerned before
No,
we
that
get
sounds
like
about right.
briefly. Yeah,
Again, it's yeah. We kind of failed people on that one.
definitely, definitely. I've referenced this one before, this source before, but I do recommend that people check out Irving Abella's history of this, where he what's the book called? None is Too Many, right? Which came out in the 70s, right around the
Mm.
time as Canada was debating whether or not to take in Vietnamese refugees during the Vietnam War. And Abella knew this, right? So he wanted to remind people of their own history of being a little bit uneasy with refugees, and remind them that, hey, no, at the end of the day, we did make the right decision after the war, and you have a chance now to make the right decision during a war, right?
Yeah.
With Vietnamese boat people. That's a topic for another time, but history does repeat itself, obviously, in some surprising ways. Okay, so like I said, I didn't want to make this like such a long episode, in part because we're recording late at night and Mac is
I'm
tired.
literally falling asleep.
So we'll briefly talk about a book that I think really represents this and that I think has mostly been forgotten from history, right? Have you ever heard of this book, Earth and High Heaven, the Gwethalyn Graham book?
No.
I have, very few people I know have actually ever heard of this. The only reason I know of it is because I study Canadian literature, but
And she's
no
in your
one.
thesis?
No. I would have nothing to add to this book's discourse if I wrote about it in my thesis. But it came out in 1944, right on the eve of the end of World War II, and it was quite successful. Right, it won the Governor General's Award at the time. I've read it. I read it a few weeks ago in preparation for this episode. I would not have given it a Governor General's Award, not because it's inherently bad, but as you put it before the episode recorded, it's very pulpy, right? So Mac, when you say that a book is pulpy, what do you mean?
All right, so it's made on a cheaper quality of paper that is made with quite literally more pulp in it, more bits of wood, more sort of chunks. Like that's quite literally what something being pulp means. It is made with more wood pulp.
Yeah.
Now, in a more like cultural, metatextual, pop culture way of understanding it, to be pulp means to be something that is non-artsy or non-artistic.
Quote unquote low art.
Yes. If art at all.
Right. Yeah. Very good. Okay. Yeah. And by the way, like this changes over time. The perfect example of this, Dracula. I only have that in mind because I recently reread it, right? But Dracula was absolutely considered to be pulp trash when it came out for the first time.
Yes.
Right? It literally had a yellow cover on it, right? Which at the time in the Victorian era was meant to signify that it was pulpy and lowbrow.
Trash.
Yep, trash. But today obviously it's considered a classic of literature and worthy of great literary analysis. Right? Yeah, exactly. Which is true. Right? It is fantastic. So obviously this can change over time. And I think this is one in which you kind of see the reverse happening, where Graham was considered to be a rather literary person. And this book was obviously recognized institutionally, right? But today, no one except a few people really know about it. And the editions that you can find are 100% pulpy. They're cheap paperback copies that, my copy was from the 60s because I think that's the last time it was actually reprinted. And it was literally falling apart in my hands as I was reading it. So it gives you some kind of indication. So I'll read you the synopsis, and I want you to tell me if this rings any bells for you as far as like classic literature connections.
Okay? No.
Yeah. Set in Montreal during the Second World War, Earth and High Heaven is the story of Erica Drake, a journalist from an affluent Westmount family who falls in love with a Jewish lawyer and has to deal with her family not actually wanting her to do this.
Is that Titanic?
It's Titanic before Titanic happened, like 50 years before Titanic. What's an other?
Okay, no, 50 years before the film Titanic.
Yes.
Decade, 2 decades after the sinking of the ship. Thank you very much.
Yes, that's true. what other piece of literature is about two people falling in love who shouldn't actually fall in love, or who aren't meant to fall in love according to social standards?
Oh God, I can't remember. You're gonna say something.
Dude, like the most famous piece of literature of all time,
Romeo
arguably.
and Juliet?
Yeah.
My brain is no, but that's I was thinking more class based.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Okay. You could
Not
argue, yeah, this is
yeah.
just an updated version of Romeo and Juliet, right?
Classism.
Yeah, it's instead of being based on two aristocratic families, it's just you change it to perceived race.
Yeah.
Um, and honestly, I'm using this here as an example. There's not there's not a lot to unpack on a literary level here, right? It is pretty
God no.
straightforward. No, like, and I brought up a few quotes here, and you can maybe read them to avoid falling asleep. Um, but it's such a straightforward novel, right? Girl falls in love with guy, her family hates it, and she tries to convince her family that he's actually a good guy, right? And throughout the novel, they keep reinforcing their anti-Semitism, um, in a way that reflects the realities of the time of just, well, he's just different, quote unquote, right? Um, and spouting all kinds of stereotypes. And by the end, they kind of um, they end up
Class
being together,
tangents
blah
and
blah blah.
kumbaya.
Yeah, exactly, right. Um, Mac, do you want to read the first quote that we have here in some important quotes? While you find it in the notes, it is
I
worth.
don't want
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't want my daughter to go through life neither flesh foul nor good nor not red herring. Living sorry, I am like actually like my eyes are very hard right now. Let me
Okay,
try that again.
yeah, we'll
I
we'll
don't want
we'll
my
make it through
daughter
these
to
quotes and then we'll
yeah.
stop.
I don't want my daughter to go through life neither flesh foul nor good red herring, living in a kind of no man's land where half the people you know will never accept him, and half the people he knows will never accept you. I don't want a son-in-law who will be an embarrassment to our friends, a son-in-law who can't put up at my club and who can't go with us to places where we've gone for all our lives. I don't want a son-in-law whom I'll have to apologize for and explain and have to hear insulted directly unless I can remember to warn people off first.
What do you get from this quote? So this is Mr. Reiser, so her father, so Erica's father, about Mark, right? The
Yeah,
the
and Mark
Jewish
is
book.
Jewish.
Yes. So it's like what transpires from this quote, like subtextually, to you?
It's just classic divide. I don't
Mhm.
want somebody, and it's this thing of again trying to say, oh, but we'll be embarrassment to him as well. And it's like,
Exactly.
don't put words in his mouth.
Right. Uh,
Let the man decide for himself.
mhm.
Pretty
Yeah.
fucking simple.
Yeah. Exactly. We're doing it for his good, right? It's better this way. Blah blah blah.
For the greater good.
Exactly. Right. And there is this like subtext throughout the book of like, well, we're not going to be able to change the system, so might as well just like do the best that we can in it, type of thing.
Mm,
Right. And that kind of rhetoric often comes from Erica's family, which is aristocratic, right? Or somewhat
mhm.
bourgeois, right? A little bit. Yeah, obviously they live in Westmount, which at the time was even more like divided along class bases.
Even more affluent.
Exactly. Right. Um, so I thought it was an interesting quote as like a really good example of what you see basically repeated throughout the novel, right? This kind
Yeah.
of idea comes up like 16 times in a very short novel. It's like less than 200 pages long.
Which
Um,
isn't it's in of itself is not a problem
no,
technically.
no, no.
Saturday morning cartoons famously did similar things.
Um, and funny enough, and I think this is a good choice on Graham's part as a writer, you rarely actually see Mark's side of it. Mark barely has
Mm,
a voice in the novel. We don't learn much about his side of the family, what they think. You always get it through the risers. Uh, you always get it. You always get it through yeah, other people's perspective. Sorry, the Drakes, right? You always get it through their perspective and other people imposing onto him some kind of idea, right?
yes.
Which I think is really interesting as a choice. Right? Um,
I think there's
yeah, go ahead.
definitely something to be said about followers in this situation. and how fascism itself and anti-Semitism very much breed on the idea of
Yeah.
having followers, people who follow you.
Mm-hmm. Right. People who feel that the system is unjust, right?
Yes.
But can't quite put their finger on it, and you offer them
They
the
have
easy
chains
solution.
that they need to destroy, and they have means of production that they feel they just need to like grab and do something with, you know? What's another word for that?
Mm,
Seize.
right. But again, there's a reason why what you're describing, right? Communism appealed to the so-called lower classes, working classes, whereas fascism appeals to the bourgeoisie, because fascism is something that tells the bourgeoisie you're being impotent right now,
Yes.
or you're impotent, whereas communism tells the working classes that they're impotent, right? And it speaks to different people in that sense. And that's why fascism is inherently worse, because it already tells people in power that they need to increase their power, which sucks. Okay, so let's see. I'll do one more quote and then we'll call it there. Right. How about the last one at the bottom of the notes? Do you have it?
Yep. There was a
Cool.
lurking bewilderment in his eyes, as though, in spite of all his common sense and most of his experience of living, he still expected things to turn out better than they usually appear. They usually did. Above all, when that smile went out to like a light, his appalling vulnerability became evident, and you began to realize how much strain and effort had gone to the negative and fundamentally uncreative task of sheer resistance. Resistance against the general generosity amongst the general group of people, amongst general conspiracy among the general majority of people he met to drive him back into himself, to dam up so many of his natural outlets, to tell him that he was, and finally to force him to abide by the definition.
Yeah. I only bring
There
up
you
this
go.
quote. There you go. You made it. Bravo. I only bring up this quote because it represents on a character basis, right, how Erica is much more forceful in the novel than
Mm,
Mark. He is depicted as rather resigned and beaten down by the world, and his own insecurities. And
mm.
so I found this quote as like a really good example of that, right?
Yeah.
Also, I don't know if you caught that from the two quotes that you read. It is a really overwritten novel.
Oh God, yes. Oh my God, it's part of what made it so hard to read.
It's like it takes so long to get through a single sentence. You're like, this really didn't need to be this.
You need to learn punctuation, lady.
So you, so based off of these two quotes, and there are others that we could have read, but it's just um, for the sake of time and because Mac is falling asleep, we're not doing it. But do you think that this should have gotten the Governor General's award just based off of
Um,
what you've read?
oh, what's the criteria for it again? Like, what's the actual definition for the Governor General's award?
Oh, that's an actually good question. Hold on. Um, Governor General's Award Literature Criteria. Okay. Recognizes most notable English and French language books in Canada. That's what they say on the website, is notable, right? So I don't know if that answers the question for you, Mac. So yeah, it's meant to be most notable.
Ah, in a way, I guess it was, getting on the New York Times best-selling list, number one, all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
But that's, again, sort of going to that idea of Steven Spielberg. That'd be like saying what made Jurassic Park the most notable was all the money it made at the box office.
I mean, it is still incredible.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
you're trying to say something is notable for the money it makes, and
Yes.
that's not what you want to do with literature and all those other sort of art forms.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. People have a tendency these days to say like, "Oh, these awards are political." Right? The reason why so many indigenous peoples, and I don't say I believe this, but this you hear this a lot. The reason why so many indigenous and black and other people win these awards is
Mm.
because it's just political. We want to make amends and blah blah blah. Right? But they don't actually quote unquote deserve it. We can have a whole discussion about whether that's true or not. I think by and large that's not true.
Mm.
Although there are some awards that still to this day I don't think were deserved. Right? Um, I do wonder if part of the reason why Graham's book won the Governor General's Award was because even if it's not explicitly the best on like a literary quality level, it does tap into a sentiment that was generally felt at the
Yes.
time, right?
Yes.
And are there better books that have done that since and before? Yeah, yeah. But it just hit at the right time, I think. And I think that's kind of what makes it why it won that. And
Mm.
unfortunately, it's kind of been lost to time. And no one's going to think about it ever again after this episode. Like,
Yeah, well, it just goes to, I don't know, awards, award seasons, award shows. It's
mhm.
not, they don't carry the level of prestige that you thought they did, you know.
Yeah.
Obama awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. What's that worth?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Nobel Peace Prize for including more donor drone strikes.
Incredible. Love it. Right. Totally deserved.
Mm.
Okay. So we'll call it there before you fall asleep again.
Oh
Um,
yeah. I'm so sorry, everybody. I'm just bushed.
so our next episode should be on something else. We'll see. Something
Yeah.
else. And maybe and certainly a Pop Canada needs to be done. We're
Yes.
behind on Pop Canada. So
You're all right. Maybe next weekend.
yeah, cool. So we'll do that, and Mac, take us away.
All right, everybody. If you enjoy what you're listening to and you No, that was fake. But if you did enjoy the episode, or if you've at least enjoyed our other episodes and not this whatever thing I was doing, I dragged us down on this one, then please keep on listening, spread us word of mouth. And get in contact. We always love hearing what you guys have to say. It's always appreciated. If you'd like to sort of pay a little bit more in, there's a sort of pay what you feel we're worth. There is a Patreon if you'd like to sort of subscribe, get access to more episodes, longer, more series, that sort of thing. But the show will remain forever free because we're bloody damn commies.
We should have a ticker every time you mention that on the episode.
I have to, or else I will lose my membership card.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you
If
have
I
to
work
mention.
in if I work in a couple more memberships, I get a free yogurt.
On that note, thanks everyone. Cheers.
Cheers.